a really good book costs $10 or $20 and it can change your life in a meaningful way. So it's not something I believe in saving money on. And this is even back when I was broke and I had no money. I always spent money on books. I never viewed that as an expense. That's an investment to me. And I probably spend 10 times as much money on books as I actually get through. So in other words, like for every $200 worth of books I buy, I actually end up making it through 10%. So I'll read $20 worth of books, but it's still absolutely worth it.
You and I have that in common.
Yeah, and anything that's one of the greats, like if I read a book and I know that it's amazing, I'll buy multiple copies, partially to give away, partially because I have them lying around the house. And these days, I find myself rereading as much or more as I do reading. Because I think this was a tweet from an account on Twitter that I saw. This guy Illustratus, and he basically said, I don't want to read everything. I just want to read the 100 great books over and over again. And I think there's a lot to that. So it's really more about identifying what are the great books to you, because different books speak to different people, and then really absorbing those. Because I don't know about you, but I have very poor retention. I have to, I skim, I speed read, I jump around, and I could not tell you specific passages or quotes from books, but at some deep level, you do absorb them, and they become part of the threads of the tapestry of your psyche. So they do kind of weave in there. There are books that I'm sure you've had this feeling where you pick up a book, you start reading it, you're like, oh, this is pretty interesting, this is pretty good, and you're getting this increasing sense of deja vu, and then about 2/3 or halfway through the book, you realize, oh, I've read this book before, and that's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. It means you were ready to reread it.
What are the books you're rereading now?
It's a good question. I'll pull up my Kindle app as we talk. But usually I'm always rereading some books on science. Like I read 7 Brief Lessons on Physics. I think that was the name of it. I've read that one at least twice. I'm rereading Sapiens again because I love that book so much. I'm pretty much always rereading something by either Jiddu Krishnamurti or Osho. Those are kind of my favorite philosophers. I'm reading a book on Rene Girard's mimetic theory. It's more of an overview book because I couldn't make it through his actual writings. I'm reading Tools of Titans, Tim Ferriss's summary book of what he's learned from a lot of gay performers. I'm rereading Stories of Your Life and Others by Ted Chiang. It's one of my favorite sci-fi novels. I'm reading a book on called Thermo-Info-Complexity. It's actually by a friend of mine. It's not published yet. I just finished reading Persuasion. Well, I should say I finished skimming Persuasion, Robert Cialdini. I don't think I needed to read the entire book to get the point, but it was still good to read what I did. I recently reread The Lessons of History by Will and Ariel Durant. It's
I
a great
love that
little
book.
history book. Yeah, I'm currently reading Story of Philosophy, also by Will Durant. I have a young kid now, so I've got a lot of child raising books that I use more as reference material than anything else. Recently read some Emerson, some Chesterfield. Let's see, I've got a Leo Tolstoy book here. I've got another Osho book. I've got Delusion Damage, which is this blog that I used to love. I have pieces of it saved up. Alan Watts. Let's see, Scott Adams. I reread God's Debris recently. Tao Te Ching, a friend of mine, is rereading it, so I picked it up again. There's tons. I mean, I could just go on and on. There's a von Mises book here. There's The Undercover Economist, the Richard Bach book. There's some Jed McKenna books. I was recently trying to reread Moby Dick and Hamlet just to try and get back into fiction, but I didn't make it through either one.
Do you set aside time in your day to reread or like to read it all? Or is it like a consistent thing, or do you fit it in when you have time?
I read when I'm bored of everything else, but the good news is I get bored very easily. So there's always a book to capture the imagination. Usually at nighttime before I go to bed, I'll read, but it's not a flawless thing. When I'm on vacation, I'll read, but if I'm sitting in a Lyft or an Uber, I'll read. Sometimes in the morning at home, after I've worked out, I'll just read. Sometimes when I wake up, I'll just grab my phone and read. I don't set. I'm not a very disciplined person, so I don't really set these hard and fast rules for myself. But the good news is I just love to read, and because I love to read. Whenever I'm bored and I have time, I just do it. And thanks to the iPhone and the Kindle and the iPad, they just make it really easy. Oh, I've got 2 books here in Feynman, Perfectly Reasonable Deviation, which is by him, and then Genius, which is a James Gleick book about Feynman. So Just as we're talking, I'm flipping through and looking more. Evolution of Everything by Matt Ridley is one of my favorite authors. I've read everything of his and reread everything of his. Little Dale Carnegie in here. The Three Body Problem, Man's Search for Meaning. There's lots. Sex at Dawn. There's a lot of books out there.
Your Kindle sounds like my dream.
Well, I'm going through right now. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books are downloaded. It's not even like, I mean, we could sit here the entire podcast, not be going through them.
You've said before you think of books as throwaways. How did you come to think about books like that, and what impact has that had on what you read?
I mean, that's really an impact of the internet. Once the internet came along, I think it's destroyed everybody's attention span, because now all of humanity's works are available to you at any given time, and you're being interrupted constantly. So just our attention span goes down, our ability to focus goes down. But at the same time, we just become more judicious. We also want the meat. And the problem with books is that to write a book, to publish a physical dead tree book, it just takes a lot of work and effort and money. So sometimes people start wrapping long books around simple ideas. Those are probably my least favorite books, and it's kind of why I avoid the whole business and self-help category, because you generally have one good idea and it's buried in hundreds or thousands of pages and lots of anecdotes. So what happened was I just noticed that sometime in the late 90s, I stopped reading as much as I used to, and I started reading more blogs. I started reading less books and more blogs, and great blogs like Farnham Street and Kevin Simler's blog, Melting Asphalt, and so on. You get incredibly smart people digestifying, simplifying, and writing these great things, but it's only a page or two or three pages. So I got really into blogs. But then I'd stop reading books, and a lot of the oldest wisdom is actually in books. And with books, you're now talking about the combined works of all of humanity as opposed to just who happens to be blogging right now. So I realized I missed that. And then with the Kindle and the iBooks coming along, that allowed me to start treating books like I treat blogs, which is when I go to a blog, I'll actually skim through lots of articles until I find one that looks really interesting. I'll read that whole article all the way through and maybe take notes. So now I treat books the same way, which is I'll skim through a large number of books. I'll put them down. I'll jump around, back, forward, middle, until I find a part that's interesting. Then I'll just consume that piece. And I won't feel guilty about having to finish the entire book. Because I just view it as a blog archive, right? It's like a blog might have 300 posts on it, and you can read just the 2, 3, 5 that you need right now. And I think you can think of a book the same way. And then that opens the world and web of books back open to us instead of it being buried somewhere. I think, like many people, I know of a lot of friends who are currently stuck on a book somewhere. And if you ask people if they read, everybody says they read. Everybody says they're reading a book. They can answer which book they're reading. But the reality is very few people actually read and actually finish books.
Yes,
and I think that's probably because of all these societal and personal rules that we've put up. Like, you must finish a book and you must read books that are good for you, and you can't read junk food books, and this is a hot book right now, and so on. The reality is I don't actually read that much compared to what people think. Like I probably read 1 to 2 hours a day, and that puts me in the top 0.00001%. I think that alone accounts for any material success that I've had in my life and any intelligence that I might have, because real people don't read an hour a day. Real people, I think, read a minute a day or less. Making it an actual habit is the most important thing. And how you make it a habit doesn't matter. It's very much like exercise or working out. Do something every day. It almost doesn't matter what you do. So the people who are obsessing over, like, should I be weight training, or should I be doing tennis, or should I be doing Pilates, or should I be doing the high intensity training method versus the happy body versus whatever, they're missing the point. The important thing is to do something every day. It doesn't matter what it is. So the same way, I would argue the important thing is to read every day. And it doesn't matter. It almost doesn't matter what you read, because eventually you'll read enough things and your interest will lead you there that it'll dramatically improve your life. So just like the best workout for you is the one that you're excited enough to do every day, the same way I would say the best books to read are the ones that are books or blogs or Twitter or whatever, anything with ideas and information and learning. The best ones to read are the ones that you're excited about reading all the time.
Most of the people that I know that read quite a bit, they have a reading habit like you. You're described as a very habitual person. Where did that come from?
Oh, that might have come from the Tim Ferriss podcast. I don't think I'm more habitual than anybody else. I think human beings are entirely creatures of habit. As young children are born with no habit loops. They're essentially born as blank slates, and then they habituate themselves to things and they learn patterns and they get conditioned and they use that to get through everyday life. And habits are good. Habits can allow you to background process certain things so that your neocortex, your frontal lobe stays available to solve brand new problems. But we also unconsciously pick up habits in the background and we keep them for decades. And we may not realize that they're bad for us, so we're ready to move on from them. To some extent, our attitude in life, our mood, our happiness levels, depression levels, these are also habits. Do we judge people? How often do we eat? What kinds of food do we eat? Do we walk or do we sit? Do we move? Do we exercise? Do we read? These are habits as well. And you absolutely need habits to function. You cannot solve every problem in life as if it's the first time it's thrown at you. But what we do is we accumulate all these habits, we put them in the bundle of identity, ego, ourselves, and then we get attached to that. I'm Shane. This is the way I am. I'm Naval. This is the way I am. And it's really important to be able to uncondition yourself, to be able to take your habits apart and say, oh, okay, well, that's a habit that I probably picked up from when I was a toddler and I was trying to get my parents' attention. And now I've just reinforced it and reinforced it and reinforced it. And I call it part of my identity. But is it serving me anymore? Is it making me happier? Is it making me healthier? Is it making me accomplish whatever I want to set out to accomplish right now? So I don't think I'm any more. In fact, I would argue I'm less habitual than most people. Like I don't like to structure my day. But to the extent that I do have habits, I'm trying to make them more deliberate rather than the accidents of history.